Hello, and welcome to the Wayfinders podcast. Let's go. In this episode, we're going to meet Monica Le. Where is Monica from?
I was born in mainland China, a small town called Ningbo.
Now, Monica has moved to Melbourne, Australia. What was the attraction that brought her here?
I really love the city that can give me a kind of diversity.
And finally, a big question, making your experience outside your new country relevant to where you are now living. What does Monica have to say about that?
Yeah, it is indeed a tough one. Even right now, I would say I'm still trying to find my way.
Let's go. Welcome, Monica, to the Wayfinders podcast.
Yeah, it's exciting. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Monica, could you maybe in a minute or so just introduce yourself to our listeners? You know, who you are, where you're from, where you've been, and where I'm speaking to you right now.
Thanks, Satya. I'm Monica. I was born in mainland China, a small town called Ningbo, and I basically spent my study life in Ningbo, and then I go to the university at Shanghai. After graduation, I work at Shanghai for 2.5 years, and then the company got me the opportunity to move to Hong Kong, and then last year, almost a year ago, I moved here in Melbourne. So now I physically based at Melbourne myself.
Wow! So Ningbo to Shanghai to Hong Kong and to Melbourne. What was the motivation that led you to Hong Kong, where you were there for 17 years? Heard correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So the first one moved from Shanghai to Hong Kong definitely is because of the job opportunity. That's where I feel very lucky. So at the age, I'm very passionate. I want to go outside the world. I want to see what it looks like compared with China. That's why when the company offered me the opportunity to move to Hong Kong, I think it's pretty good.
Were you kind of asking your employer for opportunities, or was there a role and they were kind of looking who could do? How did it come about?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think it's the mutual agreement on one side. I definitely said to the company that if the opportunity allowed, I want to move out of China that time, and there's an opportunity moving to Hong Kong. Also, an opportunity might can move to Japan as the
Yeah,
counter
right.
group there. You also got an opportunity in other side of the places. What triggers you?
Well, so I was coming the other way that you were. So I'm from Australia into China. So what I saw in China was, so this is in the 2000s, but also the 2010s, and I just
Mhm.
saw the country and cities undergoing massive change, just
Definitely.
tremendous change, and probably spurred by curiosity more than
Mm.
anything else. You know, I had
Mhm.
some language skills, so I think we met in Shanghai
Yeah, yeah.
first, but
The
then I was in
first
Hong
time, yes.
Kong, I was in Beijing, I was in Taiwan, all kinds of places. I guess you could say the appetite to understand
Mm.
the people, which was
Yep.
off the back of all the companies entering, the consumer boom, you could say, right?
Definitely. I still remember the first time we met. I mean, the first impression I get is like, wow, his Mandarin is so good. I mean, to me, Mandarin is not easy to learn, especially for someone maybe the native is not in the Chinese system. I'm really shocked. And later
I
I
think I,
realized you cannot not only can speak but also can write. That's really something cool.
well, I think Monica, you're too kind. I think I was showing off, and basically what you heard me say was probably the limits of what I could say at the time. Now, I'm curious though. So you're in Shanghai. Could you kind of share this your thinking? Like what what were you thinking at the time, and what was driving you? Because some people might say you were kind of at the center of it all, maybe in Shanghai in some ways.
Yeah, I think you asked a question actually many other people also ask me. just to be very frankly speaking, when the time I made the decision I want to move from Shanghai to Hong Kong, I actually did not really think that much. It's by the time, like maybe after 10 years, I look back and especially that 10 or 15 years is the time I think China changed the most. If that 15 years, globally, any other countries change more than China, I don't think any other countries
Mm,
because of the booming of internet, the booming of digitalization. But then one thing I would say, some people say to me, are you regretting moving out because you somehow
mm,
lose the best opportunity in mainland China? I say no, because I still remember, the first time I'm in Melbourne, Hong Kong office, and when we
mm,
were having the meeting talking about in regional project. I
mm,
think that moment, every single one was very freely sharing about their own perspective, their own
mm,
point of view about doing a project, like how it can be better, what we think should pitch in this way, that way. And then I remember at that time, someone pointed to me, say, Monica, what's your point of view? And
mm,
I'm simply shocked because this is I personally don't think I have any point of view as I was educated in China with a education system that the only thing I want to do is get a better grade, better result. I
mm,
personally don't think, I should have any personal point of view. That's where
mm,
I feel like it's really opening my mind about
mm.
doing my work in a different way. So I still treasure this kind of mental changes in myself after moving to Hong
Yeah,
Kong.
yeah. Wow. So I like this. I like this topic. So I mean, there's been a lot written about Chinese education. And actually, I remember my chief supervisor at ANU, Andy
Mm,
Kipnis, he wrote a book about this topic. And as an anthropologist, he went and sat in the classrooms in Shandong in a place called Zoping,
oh,
yeah, in Shandong. And so he went and sat in the classrooms and, and kind of ethnographically documented how education works in China. In one place, he writes about this thing around there is one answer, and
yeah.
that's the answer. Tell us about your journey between these two kind of poles. On the one hand, there is an answer, and on the other hand, like it's up to you, whatever you think. Like how have
Yeah.
you navigated that that paradigm, those poles? It's fascinating.
Yeah, if you really ask me, I think the journey itself, along the journey, although right
Mm,
now I may say I'm so lucky, having
mm,
the opportunity to experience both, but along the journey, it's
mm,
actually a bit painful because,
mm,
it's actually easy to change someone's habit maybe, but it's not easy to
mm,
change a person's mind
mm,
unless a person really want to change themselves.
mm,
Along the journey, I think one thing I really realize is both education system has something good, something bad. Just
mm,
I always treat a coin has two sided. So what Chinese education teach me is one side need to really hardworking. So everything, if you want to achieve some good result, you need to put efforts. That
mm,
kind of consistency of putting in the efforts is very important in the Chinese education. And the second thing is never give up spirit.
mm.
If you fail, you still need to go back and find a way, find the solution. I think this is all what Chinese education gives to me.
Yeah, wow. Fascinating. I really liked what you said when you were talking about the reasons that you went there. You actually said you didn't really think about it. You just went. Just went. My working title at the beginning was
Okay.
actually just go. Just go. I think about um my experiences. Like I didn't think about a lot of stuff when I went and lived overseas. Like I went and lived in, massively different cultures.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this like not thinking and just going, thinking back on that decision. Could you retrospectively deconstruct it for us?
Yeah, I would say that's best. What can best describe might be at
Mm,
that time because I'm still young.
mm,
The benefit of being young is you have a lot of brave. You
yeah,
don't dare to make any mistake. So
yeah,
at that
mm,
moment, I just say to myself, I just
mm,
go to Hong Kong. Even
mm,
I feel it did not really fit me, I still can
mm,
come back to Shanghai. There's nothing I need to worry about.
mm,
Nothing I feel like there's a lost.
yeah,
And then I really feel lucky that I go to Hong Kong, although as I mentioned, along the journey, there definitely be a lot of pain because of the
mm,
culture shock.
mm,
When the first time I go to Hong Kong, I even cannot understand Cantonese at all. The people, in the work environment, might not everyone knowing Mandarin. And when
mm,
talking with the interviewer, they don't know
mm,
English. So
mm,
to me, it's like very painful. But
mm,
once I cracked this painful journey, I
mm,
realized one thing that I can do something that I never
mm,
think I can do.
mm,
Actually, also give me another level of self confidence, which
yeah.
trigger me to explore something even bigger, even more. I mean, what's the
Yeah.
journey you feel yourself?
Oh dear, Monica's asking me questions now. I'm going to have to admit whether or not I planned my big moves overseas. Here we go.
So I was probably, well, not probably, I was definitely like you. I didn't really think about it. It was just something I wanted to do. And I remember, I'm curious about, you said that you could always go back if things didn't work out. So when I moved to, like, really moved to China, was in 2002, and I had a job at the Victorian government. I was a graduate on the graduate program there, and
Mhm.
I had, it's like you, I had an opportunity. I was being sponsored on a government program, the Young Business Scholar program in China, it was called.
Yeah.
And, so I went, and the Victorian government kept my job for a
Oh,
year.
okay. That's
Uh,
amazing.
if you come back in a year, you can take it. And I think back, I was very brave, like you. I didn't see, I had a lot of, as you, communication challenges. So I'd been
Mhm.
learning Chinese, but nothing prepares you from the classroom into the real world. My first attempt at speaking Chinese, this was back in Nanjing. We
Ah,
went out, like, our classmates from Monash University, we went out the first time, and we're like, oh, we're going to talk to some real Chinese, use our Chinese. And we went out and we found this, we thought it was a tea house, and we asked for cha. We thought we were
cha.
asking for
Yes.
tea. They brought us these eggs that were, the cha dan, is it cha dan,
Yeah,
right? Or
China.
that, yeah, they brought us these eggs which were brown and had
Yeah,
been
yeah, yeah.
cooked in tea for like hours and hours.
That's
And
interesting.
we hadn't walked into a tea shop at all. We'd walked into some kind of side of the road cafe that serves, tea boiled eggs. And we thought, oh God, like, our university degree is wasted. They've taught us the wrong thing. so so we went to McDonald's and had a Big Mac instead. Now, Monica, that's a good segue, because I'm going to ask you also about interesting this word a bit later. But
Yeah,
it's a good time for a break,
yeah,
and when we come back, we're going to talk about, because you have been brave, you've moved to Australia recently. So
sure.
a bit of a break, and then we'll come back and we will talk all about that. So see
Perfect.
you all after the break. Thank you.
Yeah, see you later.
Welcome back to the Wayfinders podcast. We're with Monica Le, who is global trotter extraordinaire, Ningbo, Shanghai, Hong Kong. And now Where am I speaking to you right now, Monica?
Melbourne, Australia.
Melbourne, Melbourne, Australia. I would like to set the scene with some facts.
Mm,
Going to ask your opinion, Monica. Does this play out with your experiences? So I'd love to hear
sure.
about that. So, do you know that when Melbourne was settled by Europeans, which was in about
Mhm.
1835, it was John Batman, not Batman, but Batman, and John
Yep.
Faulkner. They were Tasmanian pastoralists. So that they came and they said early on, looking at Melbourne, they said Melbourne's still a hillbilly camp rather than a town. So they were quite, in the early days, they weren't too keen on Melbourne. Lonely Planet today
Yep.
would say that Melbourne is, and I quote, equal parts dynamic, cosmopolitan, sports mad, arty. Melbourne simultaneously exudes style and keeps its best spots hidden, inviting discovery by food and culture lovers.
Oh,
Melbourne was voted by The Economist the world's most livable city in quite a
mm.
few years. In the early 70s, the population of Melbourne was about 2.6 million of Greater Melbourne. Now it's about 5 million. So it's
Oh,
about double. The
yep.
population's 5 million is not a, well, I'm talking to a Chinese person, so for you, 5 million is probably tiny, right? But for us, it's quite big. It's got, it's got the world's, it's got the world's largest tram network. There you go. It's got about 250 kilometers of trams. You won't get that
Okay. I
in
never
Ningbo
realized.
or in Hong Kong. Um, and it's celebrated for things like its coffee, its music. I read quickly, and to be fair, these are all promotional sources, but everything seems to paint Melbourne in such an amazing picture. But I'm curious, Monica, as a newcomer to this city, which is where I live
Yeah.
right now as well, what your experience has been. But first, why Melbourne? What brought you to Melbourne, Monica?
Okay. Yeah, I think you did a really good research, and the the ones you described just now actually quite fit what I'm feeling right now at Melbourne. Although I'm not sure whether because it's my first year at Melbourne, it's still some people call it it's a honeymoon, maybe. That's why I see all the best part of Melbourne. Yeah. To your question just now about why Melbourne, again, one reason is the job brought me here.
Hmm.
I'm very lucky. My current company offered me the opportunity to relocate from Hong Kong to Melbourne, which this is on one side, the job opportunity opened me the door. But on another side, I actually got other opportunities, can move to other countries in the world. But finally, I decided the Melbourne, Australia is um, a couple of reasons you possibly just mentioned, but I want to highlight again. One is I would say it's the diversity. After traveling around the world in the past 15 to 20 years, I really love the city that can give me a kind of diversity. The diversity means, diversified people, diversified culture, food cuisines, all the activities I can enjoy, all the arts, etc. All kinds of things that I feel the diversity in the city, which means I don't need to travel too far away. I can experience different kind of things and in the city itself. This is a really amazing. I don't think many countries, have or many cities have this kind of experience. This is number one. Number two is, although a lot of people maybe don't like the weather at Melbourne, but generally speaking, I still uh, like the weather in Australia as a general. It has
Hmm.
four seasons, and also I when I first landed in Melbourne. I really love the blue sky. It is really blue sky and really fresh air. That also really matters to me. And also, when I was staying in Melbourne, the amazing things like, National Gallery of Victoria, all these kind of arts, sports, give me a lot of exposure, even during the
Hmm.
weekend, after work. I can enjoy a lot. I still remember, the triennial of the exhibition of NGV, as well as the Australian Open, hosted it earlier this year. It's really amazing. It's not just about the sports and art. It's also the atmosphere that bring the participants that they want to explore more in the city, in the culture, in the sports. So I love all of this. You also mentioned about the coffee. I completely agree. I think it's the best of the best in the world. I would be very proud to say Melbourne is the best of the best for coffee. How about you? I know you were born in Melbourne. It's such a, I would say it's really lucky you were born here.
Yeah, thank you. I am indeed from Melbourne, and I think that this is probably a very cool topic, right? Because it's the topic of how locals look at their
Mm,
city or their home
yeah.
versus how people moving there look at it. I'm gonna have to be really honest. I think that I haven't grown up in Melbourne. I grew up on the east side of Melbourne, so I was born in a place
Okay.
called Ferntree Gully, which is near the
Hmm.
The Dandenong Mountains, and I went to school in that area. I also spent some time in Bayside, in Hampton, Sandringham area, and that was really cool. I quite like living there. But
Hmm.
I,
Yeah.
I think this is something that is, yeah, it's hard to see your own home the same way that someone moving there does. So all these things about Melbourne that I hear, great coffee, NGV, diversity, sports, I kind of go, meh. you know,
You
like
only take for granted, right?
granted, yeah, because and
Yeah.
maybe this is the thing, like, so it's not different. It's what I know.
Yeah.
Maybe as humans we're attracted to what is different, and I don't know.
That's can be the reason. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do love the coffee here, of course. So here I wanted to push Monica a little bit on her very positive impressions of Australia. Surely there are some negatives, like, how far away the country is from everywhere else in the world.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think it's a bit far from the rest of the world.
Mm,
Although to me, one of the reason I moved here also because it's still close to Asia
mm,
and the time difference to Asia is not that much, so
mm,
that I can still keep connection with my family members, my
mm.
friends in Asia Pacific. But yes, indeed, it is quite far.
Now Monica starts talking about the bigger topic of what it means to be interesting and to be in the world.
Along the way you were talking about, I think you might be right. It's more than just a lifestyle.
Mm,
It's more about what kind of person I want to be myself and
yeah.
how I want myself to get along with the world.
Mm,
When I was at Hong Kong or Great China, I think yes, we spend a lot of time on work. Is also because the whole world at the Great China, people talk about the status. So
mm,
the best of the life in people's mind possibly be they are um, with good fortune, have a lot of property, can travel around the world. But there's another part maybe missed
mm,
out is a mental part. So one thing I would say, on top of why I love Melbourne, in
mm,
the past 1 year I stayed in Melbourne. I
mm,
actually have more luxury time to think about compare with just working. But
mm,
in Melbourne, I think because of the work and life balance, I
mm,
really have time to think about, what's next for me. Especially, I think nowadays people are always very panic with all the, voice of saying, "Oh, the AI era is coming.
mm,
AI probably will replace your job.
mm,
How you are going to do." But I think I'm very lucky. I stay in Melbourne. I have more time to think about all these
mm.
compare with the time I'm at Hong Kong. it's another layer of
Mm.
the things I love.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it's really profound, isn't it? So the kind of relationship that you want to have with the world is that you can think about and kind of adjust through your living in Australia and in Melbourne.
The biggest gap at the very beginning when I moved here is
Mm,
about the working culture. Because majority of my working life is in Asia Pacific. It's such a
mm,
dynamic place. People always want to do better and want to do new things. So the pace is really fast.
mm,
And I'm lucky in the past 20 years, I gained a lot of good experience across the Asia Pacific. So when I first landed in Melbourne, when I working with a client,
yeah,
I try to introduce a lot of international best practice. And I myself feel very proud of that,
yeah.
saying, you need to learn from there because this is global best practice.
So I'm smiling because I know what happened.
They're still very polite. I
Yeah,
should have put it in this way.
yeah,
I mean, majority of client I deal with, they are very well educated in the
mm,
way they still respect in the way when you were talking. But I can sense that they don't care that much because they don't feel there's a relevance. They still will come back to me saying, "Then what does it mean for Australian market? We're only
yeah,
focusing on Australian market, domestic market. What
yeah,
does it mean?"
yeah,
So this is one of the big trouble, if you really ask me, when
yeah.
I was first in the market. But I think in the past 1 year, along the journey, I also adjusted myself. Nowadays, it becomes better.
Mm. It's a, I mean, the first point you made around the relevance of international experience is a great topic. Australians, they can be quite adventurous. You know,
Yeah,
a large group of Australians are
agree.
quite adventurous. They want to
Yeah,
go overseas. They want to work overseas. They want to experience and so on. At the same time, I've heard from many professionals who have had really strong careers overseas, like yourself, that it can be very tough coming back to Australia and
hmm
reintegrating, if that's the right word. I mean, myself, my career was mainly in, well, it was all in, pretty much all of it was in Asia until 2019 when I came back with my wife to Melbourne.
hmm
And
yeah,
like it's kind of comical, right? So probably like yourself, I've helped Chinese organizations go global around Europe. I've
yeah,
helped the biggest organizations in the world enter China and crack the China market.
yeah,
Yet when I first worked in Australia in 2019, like I was given a lot of grief from my colleagues around, did I have the right meeting agenda? Or, I asked someone at 5:45 to do something and they want to go home,
I know
or
what will come out.
really specific about the market here. Like I worked in telco
Yeah,
at first, so Optus was my client, and so Optus versus
mm,
Telstra, and the whole topic around network coverage and the 0.111% more coverage that Telstra has and what that means and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I guess it's the reality, right? How do you make
hmm
your experience relevant for for a market like Australia? Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah.
Yeah, it is indeed a tough one. Even right now, I would say I still trying to find my way. At least in the past 1 year,
Mm,
one thing I figure out is I also need to open my mind
mm,
to learn more about Australia. What is the
mm,
Aussie market? What's the challenge? What's the consumer here?
mm,
What are really they are aiming for? And then on after I study a lot about the
mm,
domestic market, then actually I understand my client more. What I
mm,
mean for understand my client more is about understanding why they feel like your international experience might not be relevant.
yeah.
It's not about not because they also never has the experience in Asia Pacific. So the
Mm,
story I'm talking about global experience,
mm,
they might not know what really means to them. So
mm,
when I change the way of package the story from my international experience, taking to the domestic market what it really means to them,
mm.
actually the message perceived way better.
Fantastic. Now, Monica, let's wrap up. I thought we could wrap up with two ways. So what's the story you want to share with people who are our listeners who are thinking about moving from somewhere in the world to Australia? Maybe, in like 30 seconds, a minute, what do they need to do, think about, prepare to make a successful move to Australia?
Yeah, it might not be advice. It's more about my experience sharing. I think the first thing is, before moving to any countries, not just Australia, I think it's very important to understand yourself
Mm,
why you want to move. Would still say not every single one fit for moving to another world. It
mm,
really depends on your own ambition, on your own achieving life, your own objective or goal in your life. So the first thing is still one step back to really
mm,
ask yourself why.
mm,
The second thing is after you really clear about you want to move to, for example, Australia, and then you probably can make a list of the things, not about positive, but negative. What are the things you think moving to Australia is not good? Although, you just described there's a lot of things good about Melbourne, but there might be something not good for moving to Melbourne that, you list out.
mm,
Only by you list out all the negative things that you feel like you can overcome, then the last advice I have is go back to our original topic is
mm,
be brave, be optimistic,
mm,
because every single places you move in, there definitely be sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. So
mm,
if you really ask me, I will go back to why, think
mm,
a good planning,
mm.
and then be optimistic.
Very wise words. Monica, thank you for being on this episode of Wayfinders. It's been amazing talking with you and listening and learning from you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really a very pleasant journey. Thank you so much for having this section.
See you next time, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wayfinders. I hope you found it interesting. This is a new initiative for me, making a podcast, and I'd love to hear your feedback. You may have some feedback on the format and quality of the podcast itself, or you may wish to recommend a guest that you'd like to hear from. I welcome that and more. You can write to me directly on sashacody@me.com. SACHACODY@me.com. I hope you can join and listen to the next episode of Wayfinders, which will be released in about 2 weeks. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.